Real quick, before we get into the show, I wanted to share a new service called Getita that Ken and I have been using that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?
Welcome everyone to the Firing the Man podcast, a show for anyone who wants to be their own boss. If you sit in a cubicle every day and know you are capable of more, then join us. This show will help you build a business and grow your passive income streams in just a few short hours per day. And now your hosts, serial entrepreneurs David Schomer and Ken Wilson.
Welcome, everyone, to the Firing the Man podcast, where entrepreneurs and e-commerce leaders learn how to break free from the 9-to-5 and build a thriving business. Today, we have a powerhouse guest who's been helping Shopify merchants unlock massive growth for over a decade. He's the founder of EtherCycle, a Shopify-focused consultancy specializing in high-converting themes, seamless migrations, and high conversion rate optimization. But that's not all. He's also the voice behind the Unofficial Shopify podcast, a top-rated show packed with insights from industry experts. If you're looking to scale your e-commerce brand, maximize your store's potential, and learn from one of the sharpest minds in Shopify, you are in the right place. Please welcome to the show, Kurt Elster.
Kurt. Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I've very excited to record this podcast with you. As I was mentioning before the show, you are one of the OGs in the e-commerce space. What is that like?
Man, I think I get a lot of credit that I don't deserve. I don't know. I think I still wrestle with imposter syndrome because I know enough to know what I don't know. Like, I often wonder if I knew what I know now in starting this business, would I still start it? Would I start the same business? And would I start a different business? Would I go into business at all? Like, who knows? If you had, hindsight being 2020, it's very strange.
Yeah, absolutely. What would be your answer to that question? Would you start this business again?
100%. I would start a business again. And I think for sure I would do a service business, an online-based business. I know enough about e-commerce and product development that like the unit economics of products and selling them online, I don't have the personality for it, right? There's just a lot. You got to be really dialed in on your numbers. Whereas web development, digital products, services, much bigger profit margins. And so it also much larger margin of error.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's good you found your niche and have obviously been successful there. So can you share with us a little bit about your background and your path in the e-commerce world?
Yeah. In high school, I engaged in retail arbitrage. I grew up in Illinois, in Chicago, and we are the birthplace of Beanie Babies. And if you remember the Beanie Baby craze of the 90s, that was huge, and I missed out on it. But I saw that opportunity. I was interested. And so when Furbies were the next hot thing, I would beg my mom to drive me to the mall, try to buy Furbies, and then flip them on eBay. And at that time, you sold it with a money order, right? But to a high school kid, that was being able to clear a profit doing that. I was like, I am a genius, and this is the greatest thing ever. And I sold 10, made a few $100 in the process. But that was enough. That was enough to get me interested, where I started pursuing. I was like, okay, online computers make sense to me. Online makes sense to me. And so and eBay is early e-commerce. That pushed me in the direction of e-commerce, where I kept doing those eBay hustles through college. And then post-college, I was like, okay, now what? What do we do? And I tried to start an e-commerce platform. It was a terrible idea, right? I didn't know what I didn't know. And so, I wouldn't necessarily, for sure, I would not have tried to start another e-commerce platform. But our idea was we'd have an e-commerce platform specific to bike shops. And that's where the name EtherCycle came from. It was Ethernet and Bicycle. That's an okay name. But it didn't work out. And pretty soon we started doing just general web development, started doing work for agencies, and then discovered Shopify. And we did our first Shopify project, which is for a bike shop. And I said, this is the easiest thing I've ever used. Like compared to WordPress, compared to the other e-com platforms that were out there. And I'm like, and we did another one. And we're like, wow, that was really easy too. And it was for Banded Dunes Golf Course of all places. And we only had to do the 2 before we said, wait a second, why are we doing anything else? What happens if we only do Shopify? And that's when things really took off. And we said, we need a way to market this. And I've been a guest on a few podcasts. Really had no business doing it, did it in the most echoey room possible with a $30 USB microphone, right? Did everything wrong and yet survived, made it. It worked.
That's outstanding. Now, as you were explaining your journey, have you been self-employed throughout, or was there a period of time where you were working for somebody?
I've had, even when I was starting that business, actually I worked in a bike shop doing retail. I always had part-time retail jobs, and had a full-time job, but as a 1099 contractor, managing eBay listings for a aftermarket automotive dropshipper. I knew cars, I knew eBay, and I needed work. And so I cut my teeth at TH Motorsports. I think it's still around to this day, many years later. But they were in e-commerce and dropshipping, and I saw how that business was run. And there was just a few guys, and it was all about, customer support and relationships. And so that was a good experience that kind of exposed me to an early online only business.
Okay.
That would have been 2008.
That's early in the life cycle of e-commerce. That was definitely the Wild West, or what I would consider to be the Wild West. And that's really neat. That's really neat. With the show being called Firing the Man, I got to ask, what was the point in time where you said to yourself, I'm ready to do this full time. I'm done with these 1099 positions. Let's go full steam ahead and fire the man.
I would tying my shoes to drive to that office, and go work on uploading my eBay listings. And I broke down crying, and I still remember my Converse All-Stars. And it was then I said, you know what, do or die. I had enough cash saved where I knew I could just go for it. And my expenses were so low as a young man, where I had 4 roommates in an apartment, and a cheap car, my Subaru. And so I could do this. I'm just going to go for it. Couldn't do that today with a family, of course. But I was in a good position. I don't know that I appreciated it. And I walked in, and I did not know what the business I was going to start was. And I quit. And I was and I gave 7-day notice. That's how excited I was. And then the next day in the shower, when I was we'll build an e-commerce platform. How hard could that be? Right? Of course, it's completely insane. And, I had a friend who had just gotten laid off. He was on fun employment, and he agreed to meet me at a Starbucks for weeks. And we built the early concept, and then I couldn't get it off the ground.
That's okay. That's okay. Now, as people hear that story, they may call that a failure. However, if you could go back in time, would you have gone that route? Were there valuable lessons that you took out of that experience that led to future success?
The insanity of it was because that was 2009. And so if you think about the economy at that time, that was serious recession. It was dark days, especially if you're a kid who just wanted to get a job out of college. I had just got blown off on so many interviews and positions where it became, I was always interested in entrepreneurship, but at that point it was oh, that is the only path. It's what else do I have to lose here? And so but because of that environment, I was able to sign a lease on office space, no questions asked. And they're we're not even going to charge you for the first 6 months, and gave us a sweetheart deal on it because the thing had been empty for 2 years at that point. And so I got free office space. And so I was all right, well, this idea is not working. but there were like local businesses that would knock on our door and be like, hey, can you help us with our website? And I was like, I would tell them, that's not what we do. I'd turn them away. And then wait a second, this business isn't working. And pretty soon I'm going to have to start paying rent. And so I'm like, well, let's try selling them some WordPress sites. And the first time I did it, I couldn't believe it. And the first time I sold one for like 7,000, I'm like, is this even legal? Right. And from there figured it out, but it's kind of stumbled into it. But I viewed it as a pivot. It's like, okay, you were building a thing for the web for yourself, a service, a SaaS. Now build websites for other people. That comparatively, it just seems so simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Literally, opportunity was knocking at your door.
Yes.
And you listened. That's very cool. That's very cool. So going from those early days of the 6 months of free office space, of the e-commerce platform not panning out the way you would thought, to where you are today, what does that story look like?
That was niche down. And so for us, it was, hey, there's this new thing called Shopify. We hitched our cart to the right horse at the right time, for sure. Shopify was early. And then having absolute hubris or chutzpah, we said, well, the podcast's working title will be the unofficial Shopify podcast, and then we'll figure out the title. And then I just never did it. We were like, well, that's what it is, right? Is we just stuck with it. And we kind of figured like, well, they'll politely ask us not to. And, now after the fact, I know like they were well aware, and it seems, they let us get away with it. And to this, at this point, I've had Shopify's president, Harley Finkelstein, has been on the podcast twice. And so it's like, all right, obviously, we have some approval there. But yeah, that podcast was a big part of it. Guest podcasting, borrowing from other people's audiences was a big part of it. And being active in the community. Like, Facebook groups were still a big thing then. So being active there, like, an early client we got was Jay Leno's Garage. And I got that. I just messaged a guy on Facebook in the Shopify Plus community who was an investor in that project or an advisor. And I said, hey, I like your site. I like what you do. I'm a car guy, and I just happen to be into detailing. And he said, oh, well, I'll send you a kit. It's okay. And I thanked him, and I said, as a thank you, can I send you a screencast of some ideas for this site? And like, people really aren't doing screencasts yet. And he thought that was really cool. We ended up flying out. I met Jay Leno. We got a tour of his garage, like the craziest thing I've ever done. And getting something like that, when you can attach a big name like that, that helps a lot for credibility. Same with like our first Shopify project was, and again, it's that hubris where like, as a young man, you don't know how immodest you can be in your confidence. And I said, we've never worked on Shopify. Let's just design. I will personally design a custom theme, and my partner will develop it. And we did. And the Shopify was so small, then they noticed. And they said, you should join the experts program. It's this new thing. The first lead I got from that was Bandon Dunes Golf Course. If you're into golf, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so we built their pro shop on Shopify. And so like out the gate, we're starting strong, but like, man, so much of it felt like luck. But I think the takeaway there is you can do things that increase the opportunities that come to you. Make yourself available and build in public, make people aware of what you're doing. And so they know, so that you're top of mind, so that they know when to come to you and for what or who to refer to you. And that's powerful, especially like it's different than just trying to sell. That can work too, but that's not me. I feel sleazy and gross. Like I got a little bit of a social anxiety disorder. I don't want to be cold emailing people, right? I don't want to cold call people. And so I had to figure out something else. And that answer was content marketing. That's a long answer. No,
I love it though. And I think for a lot of people, regardless of what industry you're in, that's really good advice. Because what you're talking about, the sleazy salesman, I think that's something that everybody at least acknowledges exists and doesn't want to be that way. And, one of the, I have mentioned I've been a fan of yours from afar for quite some time. And, you're putting value out into the universe that's beneficial to other entrepreneurs. And that is why I wanted to have you on the podcast. It's why I'm sure some of your clients sign up with you, is because you're helping them knock down steps 1 through 6. And if they need help with steps 7 through 10, hey, here you are to help out. And so I think that's really, really good advice. And especially in this digital age where providing value and being of service to other people is a great marketing tactic for sure.
And, the big, especially like the podcast content and especially like video content as well, but any kind of that, any kind of content that's face to camera, it creates a personal connection. And so by the time someone reaches out to us and I talk to them on the phone, there's no me selling myself. They already are familiar with me and they already know I'm an authority on the thing they're looking for. And so it really makes it much more casual. It makes it much easier on me and them, right? To just have a conversation and then decide, all right, are we a good fit? Should we work together?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I really like that approach. So now when people think of e-commerce, sometimes they think of selling on Amazon or Etsy or Groupon or Walmart. And then there's of course your direct to consumer website. And there's a saying from the movie Field of Dreams: if you build it, they will come. And
they will not.
They will not. You are right. And so this is a 2-part question. Let's start with the first part of this. You interact with a lot of really successful e-commerce entrepreneurs. When considering kind of that diversification between these different platforms, where does Shopify fit in? Is it something that, most of these big sellers that you're engaging with, is that their focal point? Is it, do they have 90% Amazon businesses? What, if you were to design a well-rounded entrepreneur, what would their sales breakdown look like?
Well, it's kind of interesting about Shopify is it operates on this hub and spoke model. So to think of it as like, I would not think of it as only online store. For the sake of my work, for me, that's what it is. But it really, like, all these sales channels can plug into it and they have more options than just an online store. But like, you can manage everything within Shopify and have Amazon, Walmart, all of those things be sales channels, hubs or spokes attached to your Shopify, your hub, your entrepreneurship OS. As far as breakdown, I view it, you have the brand. That online store lets you do a real branded experience and tell your story. I think that's the important part. And prove that you are a real business. Because you'll sometimes see this, like even someone shopping on Amazon may then search out the seller or brand name, find the website, and then buy from the one they're more comfortable with, either Amazon or direct on the site. So if we go, if we think of it as that luck sale where we're trying to create opportunity for ourselves again by casting the widest possible surface area, every one of those online channels, all those marketplaces are just additional surfaces to show your product to get those sales. And so I think a lot of people start with a marketplace like Amazon because it's faster to spin up and start selling there. And then when they see success with it, then they say, okay, I don't want to be tied to a single sales channel, especially one where I have minimal ownership. And so as a risk diversification strategy, that's where we see people either come say, hey, we're successful on Amazon. Now we want to build out this brand experience on Shopify. And often like they'll have a Shopify store already. It'll just be a little anemic, a little underwhelming. But no, I think at this point, everybody is on a marketplace, probably Amazon, maybe not with their whole catalog, but certainly with, a few hero products. And then, additionally, they want that direct to consumer sales channel where you own the experience and the first party data, and you have control over everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, going to the second part of that question, if you build it, they will come. This is a mistake I've definitely made where I've invested a lot of time into building out a website, having good creatives, and then no one shows up. And I think this is something that a lot of people run into. And so what would be your message to somebody who has invested the time or at least believes that they've invested the time in the right things and are not getting the results that they want.
Well, for sure, if you haven't launched the site yet, that if I had to go back and do everything over, you always want to start on day one is when you should start trying to collect emails, is when you should start trying to build an audience. Realistically, you want to build an audience first and then try and come up with, what product we want to sell to that audience. And you see that now with content creators. And that's not easy either. It's very difficult as well. But if when you're trying to build your own audience, I think realistically, the only way you could do it is get in front of other people's audiences. And so you could try, for sure, with generative AI, you want to try SEO tactics, try and do high intent search query blog posts. But that's such a crapshoot. It is a gamble. And, it could be months before you see results out of that. But it doesn't, you do it once and it doesn't necessarily cost you anything later. So I like that idea. But I think, trying to get in front of other people's audiences via, podcast tour, YouTube tour, PR efforts, that's probably the way to do it. Or grassroots, being very helpful in communities. And then you just happen to be like, hey, who's that guy? Oh, and then in your signature, you link back to your site or whatever it is. But in those cases, you're not selling. You're link building. You're trying to build, this organic, natural relationship. Again, time consuming. Yeah. And then of course, Facebook ads. I mean, the reality is the majority of our customers, our Shopify clients, will generate a majority of their traffic from Meta, from Facebook ads, from Instagram ads. And then, number two is usually Google. And then there's a handful of people, TikTok is way at the bottom, right? But it is an easy way, up front, if you're an early entrepreneur, to burn a lot of money if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. And I think that I'm sure there's a name for this, but I can tell you in my own entrepreneurial career, taking Facebook ads as an example, I will say, all right, it's time to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to learn this and become an overnight expert and pump a lot of money into it and then realize I need to go out and hire an expert. And I can't tell you the number of things that where I've had that experience where I have felt like I am 5 hours of YouTube away from being an expert. Here we go. And so what would be your advice to people that are interested in spinning up Meta or spinning up Google AdWords? Do you think there's value in, do you think the juice is worth the squeeze on hiring an agency to run that? Or do you think running it in-house makes sense?
Oh, man. Okay. I think you should always try to do it yourself first so that you can understand, so that you can speak the language when you're trying to hire someone, so that you're not completely in the dark, so that you're a little more confident, right? It makes life easier if you speak the same language as the person you were trying to hire, technically. Whether or not you should hire agency specialist, for sure you would want someone who isn't just good at ads, but has had success recently with something very similar to what you're doing, because there is so much that goes on there. But I think today, if I were to do it, there's enough you could look at ads for other brands in Facebook, right? And there's also services they'll show you ad templates. And with Creative OS, I think is the name of one that'll show you ad templates. And so you could I think the simplest way to get started here is to try and just replicate, work off of other people's ads, successful ads, and adjust them for your own. But man, it is tough. I don't know what the right answer is there. I spend too much time on Twitter and seeing people just struggle, either be wildly successful with ads or absolutely struggle with it and curse Zuckerberg's name, right? To want to offer an opinion there. Yeah,
Absolutely. I do really like your comment about trying it yourself first so you know what you're managing and if you do end up hiring someone, engaging with them in a meaningful way, right? You talk the language, you've walked a mile in their shoes a little bit. And I think that's a really valuable comment there. So now you have by this time probably seen thousands, if not tens of thousands of Shopify stores. And I would imagine when you log into someone's Shopify store, there's some low-hanging fruit, some areas where they're just getting it wrong, and you can jump in and make some quick fixes. And so my question to you is, what are some areas of a Shopify store that you think a lot of people get wrong?
All right, so the two things I see over and over. One, their main menu is not good. It's not optimized. And two, everybody forgets to style their checkout. And that goes for like the biggest stores. You'll log into a store that clearly is doing like 10 million a year, and then go to the checkout and it's just the default styling with like a text logo. And that's how you know, like, clearly no one in the business is ever actually placing a test order on the site, or they would catch that. So style your checkout, upload your logo, set your colors and fonts. That takes 60 seconds. That one drives me nuts. And the other one, that main menu, man, if you go in a store and it'll be like a bad one, example, bad one would be like home, shop, and then shop's a drop down with like 40 things in it. And then, about, FAQ, contact, wholesale, news, and all this stuff jammed into the main menu that has nothing to do with directly shopping. So my rule is simply, your main menu should only link to things that make money. And that's products and collections, maybe a landing page. But if you're sophisticated enough for that, you probably wouldn't have made this mistake. So just send, I want products and collections. And it's not just about optimizing that main menu. The other advantage to it is, on desktop, I can immediately see these top level categories and know exactly what you sell. It's terrible when I land on a site and I don't know what it does or sells. And on mobile, they hit that hamburger menu and boom, there's my clear list of this is what it sells.
Okay. Those are two really good tips. And you had mentioned, you went pretty in depth on the menu. On the checkout page, you had mentioned like logo, font, styles. Is there anything else in terms of like best practices for checkout?
Well, Shopify will give you the option between a 3-page and a 1-page checkout. I've done A then B tests, which are not statistically significant, but I haven't noticed a huge difference between the two. But I would still go with the 1-page checkout. I think that's just a simpler, better experience. And they would also make sure that your shipping options make sense. Like, oftentimes, especially on a newer store, you'll look at the shipping options and it'll just barf out like 10 different ways to ship the thing. How strange is that? Right? Like, limit it to, realistically, I want a free or low cost option and then an express option. If that, I want 1 or 2 options total, right? Don't give me anything else. I don't need it.
Okay. Those are really good tips there. And I think these are, the thing I like about this is it doesn't involve like crazy coding, or these are very like practical edits that a lot of people can go in, and if they're listening today, inside of a couple hours could go in and address these particular topics. So we talked about mistakes. One thing I think that's really helpful, at least when I'm working on my own website, is having examples of brands that just do it right, that are just great examples of what excellence looks like. And so I'm curious whether there are brands that you've worked with or brands that you look up to and admire. What are some of those brands out there that you are a big fan of how they are doing things?
I think a site I did not work on, but I personally admire, is Pit Vipers. Pit Vipers sells sunglasses, and their brand tone of voice is absolutely incredible. And they show what they're so good at is the site is highly styled. It looks like a 20-year-old Mac. That's what's so fun about it. And yet it follows every e-commerce best practice. So it proves that like you can have style and substance, and then marry that to a really a forceful tone of voice and absolutely succeed at that. Now, of course, it depends on like what you're selling and who you're selling it to, right? I don't want this in your face branding for if I was, selling like reading glasses, but for Pit Vipers, totally makes sense. And then another one, a retainer client that we've worked with a while, that has a site that is really like stays within the theme. They're not doing crazy coding. There's not, a ton of wild customizations, is Tactical Baby Gear. And Tactical Baby Gear does wonderfully at speaking to their audience and selling this odd niche product, which is a military style diaper bag for men, and then like related items. But they are so good at content creation that you look at that site and you go, well, obviously this is all custom designed, and it's not at all. Like that's just a off the shelf Shopify theme that we have. They created a phenomenal content. We plug that in. I think what really separates the very successful stores from the unsuccessful ones is how unique is every product page. So a site like Tactical Baby Gear, or we have another one, Montana Knife Company. Montana Knife Company has like one fancy product template, but then they'll sell a knife in 8 different colors. They will reshoot the same photos of that knife in all of the colors. And then they make a product listing that we link together with a combined listing in Shopify for every one of those colors. And so if I look at the one, like give me the mini Speed Goat, that's an actual name of a knife. And then I click orange, all of the lifestyle photos on that will switch to orange. That is the coolest thing. And obviously that the data entry and the content creation time on that is hugely time consuming. It took them months to do it, but it pays off. That's one of the most successful businesses I've seen.
That's outstanding. I'm familiar with all 3 of those brands that you mentioned. Tactical Baby Gear, I actually have received that as a gift as a new father.
Perfect.
And Montana Knife Company, they started in like the hunting and fishing niche, but they are now mainstream, like sponsoring UFC fighters. And I would imagine that they've experienced explosive growth. And that's really neat what you're talking about in terms of like having custom lifestyle images for each particular product. And that obviously takes a lot more time and resources, but from what you're saying, the juice is worth the squeeze there.
I think so. I think that's, especially, people are more sophisticated now. The pandemic turned us all into e-commerce shopping experts. And now post-pandemic, especially, if you scroll through Instagram, it will not take you long before you click through to what looks like or may not be a scam store. I mean, the number of times I've been like, oh, that's neat, click through. I'm like, that price is not right. I think this is a scam store. And the scam stores will often do a pretty good job at setting up the content in their site. And so I think it's table stakes to have that really impressive, you want that easy to use site. You want to tell your brand story. I think it needs to be clear who is behind it. That's what makes it real. And then on the product, demonstrate that you put in the effort. And Montana Knife did that. Tactical Baby Gear does that by creating unique content for every single product page. It's not generic. It's not enough to have like, well, this is our satisfaction guarantee, and it's like the same thing on every page.
I like that. You had talked about scam stores, and I think that that's something that, at least for me, is hard to describe, but I know it when I see it. There have been, like, on the consumer side of things, I've been shopping and been on a website, and there's just something that feels off about it, where I just don't feel comfortable putting my credit card information there. And I'm curious, what are some ways that you can set up your Shopify store to establish that trust with your end customer and avoid coming off as spammy or as a scam store?
For me, it's when everything is about urgency and scarcity. Like, they're not trying to sell me on them or the product. They're really just trying to sell me on missing out. And that's like, you'll see there are too many widgets. Like, stuff will be blinking, and there's a lot of timers, and the word hurry appears just too many times. It'll be like, and that stuff could be legitimate too, for sure. But because it's effective as a psychological selling tactic, and they don't want you to think critically, they want you to just make a decision quickly. That's when I'm like, okay, this is a scam. If they don't want me to make the purchase decision later, everything is about just impulse buy it now. Well, that's when I know I don't trust this.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really helpful, and I know what you're talking about, like those sites that have like the count at like the clock ticking down to where you feel like you're going to miss out on something. And so, yeah, very good. So what types of clients do you work with at EtherCycle?
Well, we want ideally we want established brands. And, my favorite are the sites, and I say this lovingly, that to me appear to be successful in spite of themselves. Like I want those opportunities where it's like, one I just worked on, I'm still working on is Meat Church. Meat Church is a guy who does barbecue videos on YouTube, and he's got 1 million subscribers, and he's got a line of seasoning and rubs. And, they put together the site, and a friend did it for them. That's often a common story. And the site worked. And then finally essentially you prove the concept, and then they go, hey, we got to upgrade. We need a better version of this. Like, we know this works, make it better. Or, hey, we want a really polished version of this. So it'll usually go like the site you built yourself or your friend, then, like the premium theme setup, maybe it looks like a little customized. And then a handful of people out of that group will move to like, something really wild. They spend a ton on a very custom site, but you don't necessarily have to go to that final step. Some very successful Shopify stores out there on, really bare bones themes. Okay.
Is there like a certain revenue threshold, or if someone would be interested in reaching out to you, is there like a strike zone or criteria for them knowing if they may be a good fit to work with you?
For sure. I mean, the folks we work with tend to be in $500,000 to $5 million range.
Okay. In annual revenue?
Yeah.
Great. Okay. No, that's helpful. Well, to the Firing the Man audience, if you're interested in working with Kurt, I will post links to all of his stuff down in the show notes. Now, Kurt, before we wrap up the interview, we have a section of the show called the Fire Round. It's 4 questions we ask every guest. Are you ready?
Hit me.
What is your favorite book?
Ooh. Oh, man. My mind has immediately gone blank. My favorite book is a how-to manual called How to Shoot Video That Doesn't Suck. Everybody's got a phenomenal camera in their pocket that can also edit video. And so much of marketing is video-based now, especially if you sell a product. Knowing how to do it right is intimidating. This book, How to Shoot Video That Doesn't Suck, is the easiest way to figure it out.
Standing read. I'm adding that to my list. Is that one that you ought to buy like a hard copy version, or does Audible do it justice?
It very illustrated, very easy to get through, but yeah, you want the actual physical copy for this one.
Got it. I'm going to add that to my Amazon cart. What are your hobbies?
Ooh, last year I put 700 miles on an e-bike. I explored all over Lake County and loved it. And I've also spent the last several years restoring a 79 Volkswagen Beetle.
Outstanding. What is one thing that you do not miss about working for the man?
Ooh, the lack of autonomy, the lack of independence, knowing that like someone else makes your decisions for you, just waiting for just that like vague background anxiety that I may not be employed the next week. Don't miss that.
Yeah. Same. And final question. What do you think sets apart successful e-commerce entrepreneurs from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
I had a good answer to this. I think what separates the ones who are really successful are the folks who two things. They understand their unit economics, so they don't get themselves into trouble. You can have a very successful business that is also wildly unprofitable. So like that, number one, know your numbers, know your unit economics. And then number two, can you communicate your story? And like, if you can master telling your own story, and that I know that it's so ambiguous and vague, but it's one of the, like, as you attempt it, you start to figure it out. That will lend to, better communications, better storytelling, better social, better product. Like, it will just be diffused into everything you do with your brand marketing.
Outstanding. That is a great answer. Well, Kurt, want to thank you for being a guest on the Firing the Man podcast. If people are interested in getting in touch with you or working with you, what would be the best way?
Oh my gosh. Google me, Kurt Elster. Check out kurtelster.com. That's got links to everything. Of course, I'm active on LinkedIn and Twitter. And obviously you could apply at ethercycle.com.
Very nice. And do yourself a favor and check out the unofficial Shopify podcast. It is outstanding. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I've been a fan for a while. Kurt, thank you so much for your time and looking forward to staying in touch.
David, thank you.
Before you go, we wanted to share a new service that Ken and I have been using called Getita that has made us over $10,000 in Amazon reimbursements. The service requires no monthly subscription, and Getita collects a small percentage of the money they recover for you. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up and works on all Amazon marketplaces. Go to Getita.com, Getida.com, and enter promo code FTM400. That's FTM for Firing the Man 400 to get your first $400 in reimbursements commission free. How much money does Amazon owe you?